Welcome, Carl.
Greetings, Michael. Super excited to talk. This is going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to today's conversation. I was looking back over kind of the podcast episodes we've done for the past few months, and I guess no great surprise looking back, but one of the most popular episodes that we've done was sort of this like duo episode 17 and 18 around how do you talk your clients off the scary ledge when bad stuff's happening, and then like how do you actually get them reoriented back to where they should be focused. And it was a really popular episode, but I got a lot of questions, at least on our end. I would imagine you got some of these as well. It was like, hey, cool conversation, but like my problem right now isn't the market's crashing. My problem right now is like it's gone up for 10 straight years, and I've got clients that want to go all in now because 10 years into a bull market, so it's got to keep going. And the challenge is not like I need to talk my client off of the ledge of selling out at a bear market bottom. It's I got to talk my client off the ledge because they want to go all in because markets keep going up. So kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum. And I don't know if you have the same conversation to talk someone back from being too enthusiastic as you do when they're being too negative, or what you do to handle those kinds of situations.
Yeah, that's really fun. So I call like that conversation has always, the name I gave it years ago was this scary markets conversation. But I think we actually worked on this for a while. We haven't released it anywhere yet, but I know I've recorded all the videos for it. Is called the happy markets conversation. And it's the same thing. So rather than rehash that specifically, I would just say like, go back and listen to that episode and realize that you can absolutely use those same tools, right? Like quickly it's, I want to move all my money to Bitcoin. I'm not picking on Bitcoin. I'm just picking on something, right? Like, so this is not about Bitcoin. I don't need any emails, please. I want to move all my money to Bitcoin. We can do the exact same thing, like absorb with empathy, right? Like what we want to say is, are you kidding me? But don't. I understand, like, especially if I read some stuff, I understand why you may want to do that. We absorb with empathy. We use the please hold method, right? We go get the document, the touchstone document that, like, I like to think of it as a one-page plan, but whatever you use, your investment policy statement. We absorb with empathy. We talk about, we circle back to values. We talk about goals. We talk about process. We talk about product, and we say, okay, great, let's stay the course. Like we can do the same thing use the same tools, happy markets. But so go back and review that would be my suggestion. But we could, if you think it would be helpful, there's another conversation called the overconfidence conversation, which is more really powerful. It's tricky and fun, but it's really powerful, like especially for like specific moves. Like I want to move all my money to, I've got a chance to buy equity in my company or Bitcoin or whatever. So
I've got this thing. I made a bunch of money in it. I want to put all my money in it. Like those kinds of scenarios. Like maybe that's a little Bitcoin I bought on the side and went it up. Maybe that's my company stock because that always goes up. So we got to put more in it, or even just in the portfolio, right? I mean, we all have that experience. Like you put a statement in front of a client with all the individual line items of what you own their portfolio. And like everybody does the same thing. They find the line item that did the worst and said, why do we own less of this? And they find the line item that did the best. And like, why don't we own everything in this? Right. So we always get that whatever's working, like, why can't we just go all in on this thing? It's working.
Totally. Let's talk about that. But before we do, let's talk about that. Like that thing is really interesting for us to remember. That idea of like, right, the definition of a diversified portfolio would be that there's something that's working, there's a bunch of stuff that's okay, and there's some things that are not absolutely not working, and they rotate, right? Like that's the definition. And so remember, when especially entrepreneurs and business owners, when they want to fire the stuff that's doing poorly and put more in the stuff that's working, that makes total sense in their minds.
Right. Because in a business context, I mean, that's what you do as a business owner. Hey, we're selling this product or service or strategy. People are buying more of it. There's demand and it's profitable. So you make more of that thing. You do more of that. And if you're selling the thing that no one's buying, you stop that activity.
Totally. So you right, like you got two divisions, one's doing awesome, one's doing terrible. You kill the one that's doing terrible, you reallocate the resources to the one that's doing well. So it makes total sense. It makes total sense to hire a basketball coach that way, right? To hire somebody who remodels your kitchen. Like you would look at, it would be reasonable for you to look at the last couple of remodels they did and expect them to be as good, if not better, right? So I just think we need to have, like, again, that's another place where we need to have empathy, like especially business owners and entrepreneurs. They don't get, I mean, they do once we explain it, once we talk through it, but their first reaction is a human reaction. Like, yeah, get rid of the thing that's doing terrible, get more of the things doing well. So that's important to understand. Just a little bit of empathy around, like, that feels human. And some humans particularly are wired for that mistake. But most of us
how are you talking people back from that mistake? So like, yep, totally see why you're doing that, but that's dumb. Like, can't say it that way. So
totally. I mean, you know, obviously, like the longer discussion around just describing asset allocation is all about the idea of, like, that's how I normally started it. Is like, hey, you know what? It makes perfect sense that you would feel that way. In fact, and then I would give like the basketball coach, and then I would give the kitchen remodel, and I'd say, but here, this is a little different. This is this thing called buy low and sell high, and like sort of introducing that idea. And then that light goes off, and they're like, oh yeah, of course, with investments, you want to buy low and sell high. So that's a discussion. But what I think we want to talk about is, how do you prevent somebody from making a big mistake, a happy big mistake, like a thing they think. It's like the greed side instead of the fear.
Yeah, it's like, absolutely. It's the greed side, right? We talked about how do you walk back someone that's on the fear ledge. So how do you walk back someone that's on the greed ledge?
Okay, so I'll tell you a story. This is where this was developed. So this conversation is tricky. It takes some skill to determine the proper dosage for this conversation.
Sometimes, so like we're going heavy sarcasm here.
Yeah, sometimes it needs to be an empathetic hug, and other times you need to punch somebody in the face. Metaphorically, don't send me emails about that too. It's just a metaphor. I got some emails about using punch. It's just a metaphor. So let me walk you through it, and you'll see what I mean.
Okay.
So this was developed with a client of mine, and his name, let me think about Rick was his actual name, and there's enough Ricks in the world. Now I can't tell you what the stock was though. So Rick had options in a company that you would all recognize if you were in in this space in 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, covers of magazines, that sort of company, that went completely gone, like bankrupt, gone. He had options in that company, and he lost all of his money. And it represented like 80% of his net worth at the time. Now, Rick's a highly paid guy, and he had no problem getting another job. So you fast forward like 8 years later, it's rebuilt everything, it's amazing, and he's coming to me. I wasn't around, I wasn't involved. I started working with him long after that happened.
Okay.
Be clear. But he had told me the story, and his wife had definitely told me the story. So, which is a whole nother subject, right? So now, fast forward, he's working in another company, and he's got another chance to do this thing.
Okay.
And not only that, but there's like employee stock purchase. So that's what we were talking about. He was getting all these grants, and that's awesome. But he wanted to take some of his money and buy more. So, and this is a guy that just 5 years ago, right? It's human nature. We're all this way. We tend to forget painful experiences really quick. So I sat down with Rick, and we were like, so here's the questions. This is the overconfidence conversation. It's 3 questions. Question number 1 is, if you do this thing and it works out as you think, right? In other words, if you do this thing and you're right, why do you want to buy this? Oh, it's going to double in the next year. Okay, if we do this thing and you're right, how would your life be different? Now, normally, this isn't like taking your entire life savings, right? Like, normally, the answer to that question, I've actually never had it be any different than this. The answer to the question is normally like, oh, it'd be a little better, right? Like, maybe I'd retire a little earlier. We might go on more vacations. It's not like I'm going to go from having $1 million to an island.
Okay, right. So like the extreme, like, oh, my life actually would be completely different. Like, don't trot out this conversation. This is more the like.
I think it would still work. It's just not. It's not the gap isn't as big, but it would still work. You'd have to really dose heavily on the third question. So I'll explain that in a minute. So yeah, let's pretend like you said it would be amazing. But most of your clients, they've been through this. They're going to say something like, "It'd be better around the edges. Maybe I'd retire a little earlier. Maybe I'd go on a trip. We'd buy a different house. Whatever. I'd buy a new car." Like, it's not massive. And this is partially because we're massively loss averse typically, right?
Right.
So how would your life, if you did this thing and it worked out as you think it would, how would your life be better? The way I ask that is, if you made this investment or made this change you're thinking about making and you were right, how would your life be different? Question one. Question number two, if you made this investment and you were wrong, right? And let's just say, and you were wrong to the tune of like 50% lower or zero. And like in Rick's case, I could say, or zero like you did before.
Yeah, like
right?
last time.
So, but I didn't have to. I just said, if it didn't work out and there was some elbows being thrown by somebody else. So if you did this thing and it didn't work, how would your life be different? What do you think the answer relative to the first question I would normally get? Like, how would you answer that question?
Oh man, all the loss aversion starts cropping up. Like, this is a disaster. After I lost our life savings the first time around, if I do it again, I'm pretty sure my wife's going to divorce me this time. That may be joking. That may even actually be serious for some couples. Not hard for most people to come up with some pretty genuine disaster scenarios if something really bad happens.
Yeah. So I think, look, this feels a little bit to me like a righteous trick. It's not a bait and switch. Righteous tricks are always in the service of the client. A bait and switch or, sneaky stuff is in service of the advisor. We don't do those. None of the people who watch or listen to this do those, but we do pull righteous tricks. And I think this is a righteous trick because we're playing chess here. We're using loss aversion for the benefit of a good decision. So that's exactly what happens is most people we say, okay, if you were wrong and this thing goes to zero, or let's just say it gets cut in half, how would your life be different? Almost universally, the answer is like, oh, geez, that'd be bad. Like, I'd have to work for 10 more years, or you'd have to.
And because of that good old loss aversion, Kahneman Tversky, funky line, like we amplify our losses and the pain of our losses more than the benefits of our gains. Like, you literally pull that straight out of the conversation with the first two questions, because you're starting with the happy one, like, what would happen if this goes well? And you essentially you emotionally identify what gains look like. And then you ask them to think about the losses, and they emotionally identify what the losses look like, which virtually always are going to be more severe than the gains.
Totally. And I did not know it wasn't like I didn't start with how could we use, I didn't know. It was after that I shared this conversation with somebody else. They're like, well, yeah, that's because of loss aversion. I was like, oh yeah. Of course, that was my plan all along. So then question number 3 is where things get tricky. Question number 3, I'll just tell you the question, we can talk about it. Question number 3 is, have you ever been wrong before? Right. And that's where things get like, Like, so Rick, it needed to be like, hey, I don't want to point at anything too, like, please don't take this personally. Like, you may fire me for the question I'm about to ask, but you should definitely fire me if I don't. Right. Have you ever been wrong before? Somebody else, it could be like, hey, so for question number 3, let's just play a little thought experiment. Have there been things that you were really certain about that didn't work out? Right? Like, that could be the softer version of question 3. And like, okay, then like, all right, we've identified that your life would be marginally better if it goes well. We've identified that your life would be way worse, at least in your mind, if it goes poorly.
Right.
And
then inevitably I come back and say, like, yeah, but I'm gonna get the good one and not the bad one, right? It's like that's what we're all queuing up, right? I wouldn't have been doing this if I thought it was gonna go badly. Like, of course I'm gonna get the winning scenario.
I have not actually, in the whatever number of times I've gone through that conversation in real life with clients. I've actually not had anybody go, yeah, that was cute, Carl. I'm still going to double down, right? Like, or double up. Most people are like, oh yeah, yeah. But I think if you do, like, the conversation needs to be around, like, then you go straight into like, let's just revisit this plan that we built. You told me time with your kids, mainly outside and serving in the community, was the most important thing. And we're putting all of that at risk here. Like, what if we did that with a smaller piece, right? Like, you can start playing other righteous tricks. You can either be Nick Murray and say, if you do that, tell me where to send the money. That's a fine approach. And it totally works for some people. Or you can play chess and say, all right, I see like how important this is to you, but can we isolate the damage? You know, like, if there was damage, is there a way for us to contain it? And so we just sort of like, we're just deciding what level of chess we want to play. And in some cases in chess, you lose a pawn to win the game, or again, win the match ultimately.
So,
and right.
Yeah. So, if your client is that insistent, say like, hey, okay, can we just experiment with it with the portion? And then at least if this actually goes badly, we have compartmentalized the damage. And I guess the only risk, which you can't entirely avoid, is like, heaven forbid they do it with the portion and then the thing actually does work out and go up. And at some point they're just going to keep doubling down. But I suppose at the end of the day, like, that's human nature. You're only ever going to talk them off the ledge so far if they have the great unlucky misfortune of actually being lucky several times in a row.
Yeah, I think, like, we run into these people, and I think there is definitely a line. Like, I can think of a couple of situations in my career where I had to just be like, and I had to be really clear, like, look, that was lucky. That was not skill. Do you want to make another bet on luck? Right? Like, this is exactly what you do in a casino. It's not what you do with your family. Like, I've had to have that direct, like, and I always preface those direct conversations with, listen, John, you may fire me for what I'm about to tell you, but you should definitely fire me if I don't. And so I think that it's okay for us to return to, like, well, if I don't know how to connect, but most people, I think, so this points to the same, like, I really want to trade a couple of individual stocks. That violates a fundamental principle of how we invest money here. I really want to trade, like, this tension. Okay, overconfidence conversation, reconnecting to the thing. You know what? I get that, but I still, like, it kills me. I'm a doctor and I get to see all the new drugs. So I want to buy this, pharmaceutical company. So that's it. Like, I've had a couple written plans that included a separate account held somewhere else. I always made a point to, like, okay, go open that somewhere else. Like, I don't want it on our stuff. And we always had a rebalancing rule around that account. Like, we said, look, you're going to have X dollars in there. What would you agree to? And if it goes well, you're going to send some of that money back. If it goes poorly, we can have another discussion about whether or not we want to fund it again. Yeah. So those are some of the tools that I used. And I just found it's tricky to understand, like, if the only shot you have is if there's a deeper yes that you've uncovered. That's the only shot. Like, saying no to that thing that they want to do, the only way for them to say no is if you can connect them with a deeper yes. If you can't connect them with a deeper yes, it's like, there's only so much you can do, and you have to hit the road. Like, sorry, this isn't a good place for
Wait, what's my deeper yes here?
The deeper yes would have to be reconnecting me to a set of values and goals that I identified when I was thinking clearly, with the benefit of my family, my spouse, like, and you, right? Like,
so that like, pulling back to what was the plan, what were the goals, what were the underlying values, like, why were we doing all this in the first place? You want to spend more time with your kids. Does putting all your money in Bitcoin really actually get you to this goal?
Especially if it goes wrong, right? So it's all the stuff from the earlier podcast we listened just flipped. And now you've just got the added tool in your tool belt of the overconfidence conversation to be used with caution and care.
Yep. But I like the discussion and just that core 3-question framework. Like, if you do this and it works out, how would your life be different? If you make this investment and it doesn't work out, how would your life be different in the other way? And, let most people's natural loss aversion kick in. And then when they inevitably say or start thinking to themselves, like, yeah, but I'm going for the first scenario where it's good and not the second scenario when it's bad, get get them thinking with the third question, which is, have you ever been wrong before? And then cue them up, say like, oh, I guess I actually can't ignore scenario 2 because I got to own the fact that this went badly once before.
Totally. I think a lot of, especially when we're talking like market, right? So like specific like stock options and specific things, it's kind of a subset of this discussion, which we've just had. But like the market in general, to me, that's all about reminding, right? Hey, remember how you felt in 2007, 8, and 9? Like we would not be having this discussion in 2008 or 2009, I promise you. So it's all about remember. It's about our tendency to indefinitely project. It's recency bias, right? Project the recent past. We've got to elongate the definition of recent past by reminding them of what they felt here. And I used to actually, as a tool that I would keep in clients' files, is I would have people write letters when we were in the middle of those sorts of moments. Like if they came in 2008, 9 and wanted to sell out, and we had the whole discussion, scary markets conversation, we agreed to not make any decisions to jump in the water while we were in the lifeboat, right? Like, I want to get more conservative. Okay, great. I hear you. I totally, boom, scary markets. And then when we're back on the ship, we'll talk about that again. Now, we all know that when we're back on the ship, the market's going to be doing well, and they're going to say, what risk? And so I always had people, I tried to have people write notes to themselves that would, even in my office, like here's a piece of paper, write a note to yourself of how you feel right now, and we will label it open when back on ship. And if you have those notes 10 years later, you can go, hey, remember, like this is how you felt. I'm not saying it can't change, but just remember, right? So I think remembering and elongating the definition of recent past, getting people to remember how they felt, reconnecting with why, those are the only tools we got in this box to get this job done. And if those don't work, which I've had those scenarios, if they don't work, I can remember 2 of them, then we got to hit the road. It's not a good place for you.
Yeah. Well, at some point you don't want to, you don't want to be the advisor on site if the client truly manages to implode themselves, because most people don't like to accept their own blame. So if they're looking for someone to blame, it's not good to be standing near the implosion at some point.
Yeah, and even totally. And in addition, it's like, look, if you're not going to take my advice,
why are you paying me for it?
You should probably go do this. So, like, if you're going to cut your own fingers off, you may as well do it someplace where it's cheap and fast.
Yeah. Well, on that wonderfully happy note, thank you for conversation today, Carl.
Yeah, super fun, Michael. Thank you.
Absolutely.